Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, where we talk all things BYU, Big 12, and of course, conference realignment. And lately, we've been doing a series we call the ACC Spotlight, where we go around the conference taking a deeper look into each member school's perspective on realignment. And today, we continue the series with UNC. And joining us to do so is our fellow College Huddle member, Nathan from Heel Brothers. Welcome, Nathan.
How's it going, man? How you doing? I appreciate the invite.
Living the dream. Well, I appreciate you joining us. We're really excited to jump into this one.
Oh, yeah.
So, if in case you missed the announcement, we are now officially the BYU and UNC representatives, respectively, for the College Huddle, the largest independent college sports community online. And really, doing collaborations like this is one of the things that has me most excited about the College Huddle, is being able to draw upon a community of podcasters and YouTubers across the country representing different fan bases and getting together and having these conversations. So I'm really excited about that. So Nathan, the topic, I think, as we get into the off season and with things really heating up with the ACC, conference realignment has really been a hot topic lately. And before we jump into UNC, just kind of from a broader perspective, what are your thoughts on all this realignment and the direction that college football seems to be going?
Boy, it tells you where the money's at. Point blank simple. I think it tells you where the money's at. No, it's something, unfortunately, like I understand different colleges trying to get, more money for their programs and better compensation. Obviously in the day of NIL, this thing, I think if we were not in the day of NIL, we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now doing this. But since NIL has come in, and it does matter what kind of funds you have sitting there, and the type of rights that your conference can get in, and the money that they can generate, I think it does bode for certain colleges to get out of the conference. I mean, we saw the Pac-12 get dismantled. They're down to two different schools now. It's the Pac-2, a Power 5 conference. There was a Power 5, now there's a Power 4, and potentially even dwindling more than that. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But it stinks to see, honestly, in a sense. But at the same time, I understand. I get it. It's the evolution of the business. It's going to happen, and it's just something we're all going to be on the ride for.
Yeah. Yeah. And college football has always changed. Some people say that, it's always been changing. And
Mm-hmm.
you look at these conferences, realignment has been that has been a constant of college football. But I think for me, what's jarring is the pace at which it is moving at this point, and it is changing so drastically, so quickly. A lot of these things you used to hear about, and you're like, okay, this will be years to drag out before we ever see it. And now it's, anything could, you hear about it today, very well tomorrow could be completely different, and everything's changed. So it's
The
just
second Texas and Oklahoma got out of the Big 12 and got to the SEC, the whole dominoes just started to fall from there. And I forget who was the first one to lead the Pac-12. I forget exactly who it was, but whatever. I mean, that right there trickled big, and I
that
think
was
that's the
USC,
biggest question
UCLA.
right now. Was it USC?
Yeah.
Okay, so when USC finally said bump it, we're getting out of here, and they found their way out, we saw everybody outside of Oregon State and Washington State, I believe, left. All of them. They're gone. And now I think that's what's the ACC is potentially on the verge of, if what we're getting ready to talk about can happen.
Yes. So, and before we jump into that, I'm kind of curious too, just because it blew up last week, but the 80 team Super League, what do you make of that? And would you prefer that to what it seems like the direction college football is going, or would you rather not have anything to do with it? And I know I'm admitting that it seems pretty far fetched. It seems like a long shot at this point for it to happen. But hypothetically, if you could make that happen, which would you prefer?
I'd have to look at the finances of it all. How is everything distributed? Like, is it even amongst 80? Because if that's the case, then boy, let's take North Carolina, for example. North Carolina's not really a football school. I think everybody can understand that. We're more of a basketball school than football. if you did that, are you going to allocate the same amount of funds to North Carolina as you would to Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama? Or is that going to happen? Depending on what that is. Not only that, but at the end of the day, these people that play the sports in college that we love also have exams and schoolwork. They have classes. They have to be students. They are student athletes. Now, I know we have flipped that to athletes, students, but at the same time, not all of these people want to go play in the NFL and in the NBA and Major League Baseball. Not everybody wants to go do that. So there are people on these teams that aren't gonna don't want to pursue sports after this, but they want to get their education. They want to go in and learn about a subject and create a career for themselves after college. So we have to keep that in mind. So that would be extremely hard to do, in my opinion. I think you would still have to break it up in different regions and everything else. I think you're better off sticking with the format you have now than going to one big super league and saying, yep, here we go.
Well, with the Super League, I think there would still be more regional divisions, and I think we'd see something revert back. It's in some ways like it's pitched as something progressive, but it almost feels like it would revert back to in many ways, like, yeah, it's a Super League and the structure financially is a little bit different, but you'd have more regionality, and I don't know, it'd be a lot of the same schools. So in some ways it would be almost like going back, except just with a new financial model. But
It's basically saying, let's go back without the NCAA.
yeah, exactly.
That's it.
So I'm intrigued. But I'm just not a fan of the Power Two. But we'll get into that because it looks like we're very well looking at that. I mean, it's already shaping up, moving that way, and so it's all kind of starting with right now. We've got a couple lawsuits against the ACC, and that looks like that is one of the things that could really be speeding up this whole process because ACC is locked in to their contract through 2036. But depending on how these lawsuits go, from my understanding, the potential is that some of schools, if not all schools, could be out of the conference by next season, be playing in a new conference. Is that the case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, what it is right now is we have the grant of rights that has locked everybody in. Everybody signed that. Every college, all of them, they signed that. And when the new deal came up few years ago now, and now that you're seeing the realignment in the ACC, and I really think this is all centered around football. I don't think it's really centered around any other sport, but in football, everybody's trying to keep up. Like I mentioned, there's NIL. There's certain amount of funds that teams can get. I think a good comparison is in the state of South Carolina. You've got University of South Carolina. I think they're allocated like $60 million through the SEC. Clemson's not even allocated anywhere close to that. And look at the two different programs and where they've been in their recruiting and what they've accomplished and everything else. So Florida State was the first one to start chirping, to say, hey, we want to find a way to break this grant of rights. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm no lawyer. I am just a simple-minded little bird lawyer here. So I kind of read the articles and understand what I can understand, and look up a few things to kind of get somewhat of a grasp, and also look to people that are much smarter than I am to this. But with Florida State's defense in order to get out of the ACC, to challenge the grant of rights, saying that I forgot exactly how much it is to get out of it. That it's a large sum of money. It's huge. I mean, it's astronomical. But they're trying to figure out a way to say, oh, that's it's too much. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. We should be able to break that and get out of it, or at least come to a settlement to meet somewhere in the middle to be able to make that. And Florida State kept it going, but now Clemson's jumped in as backup. Now, from what I've saw so far, it seems that Florida State lost their first lawsuit the other day. It was announced the other day that they had settled, and the judges had favored with the ACC instead of Florida State. So I don't really know what happens next. I don't know if they're going to appeal it. Again, I'd have to get the guy from Plant the Spear or something. He probably understands it a little bit more than I do. But it doesn't look like right now anybody in the ACC's been able to find a way to break it. Now, there is this thing called peer pressure. And enough people start coming in. This is where North Carolina comes in. If North Carolina was to jump into this, it could very well end up tipping the scales. Right now, the ACC can find. All right, we can find. We can battle Florida State. Then they bring in Clemson. I'm like, all right, I think we can handle Florida State and Clemson. But now they're trying to fight. If Carolina was to get into it, they have to fight Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and who knows what would be after that? Maybe Virginia Tech, Miami, of that nature. I don't know. But right now, I don't see how personally, just a guy eyeballing it. I don't see how they can break the grant of rights, considering they signed them and they agreed to it. They saw the writing on the paper. They saw that and they made their decision then. And it's like anybody trying to break a contract. You can't. Hey, I'll sign for this much money. Yeah, no problem. Cool. Then say, oh well, that's not fair. That's not fair. I should be able to get out of that. That's the part I'm having issues with.
It seems like it, and I wish I could summarize everything. I've tried to follow other things, whether it's on social media or read the articles and things, and watching videos. And I've seen some people make more of a case for it, that the ACC hasn't upheld their part of the deal. And I guess if you can prove that, then I suppose that should crack the door open for getting out. But yeah, I mean, for complaining about a grant of rights which you signed does seem. But I know there's way more to it, and it's way more complex. So you mentioned if UNC gets into it, and now that's something I've heard some rumblings about. Is that going to happen? Or if it's not happening, why has it not happened yet? Like, is there a reason? Is UNC maybe where do they stand on all this? Or are they still trying to hope that the ACC can stay together, or are they also hoping to break open the grant of rights?
To be honest, okay. Number one, I don't. I just heard this. I don't know too much about it. I heard that there was somehow, some way that North Carolina, NC State would be looped together. If that happened, that's not good for North Carolina. And I'm not talking. I'm not saying this as like a rivalry aspect, anything like that, because don't like NC State, whatever. No. NC State is not as well known and is loved nationally as North Carolina. Plain and simple. Just the way it is. And North Carolina, if they're trying to move to a bigger conference, let's say they were to get out of the ACC, it's going to be the SEC or the Big Ten. There's not going to be Big 12. It's going to be the SEC or the Big Ten. Don't know which one. Could be either. It doesn't matter. It's going to be one of those two conferences. Who of those two are going to want to take an NC State? Because they're not garnering very much interest. Same thing with Duke. Duke's having the same issue. So I think for some of the teams in the ACC, I believe there are a group of people that are straddled together. You're probably your Boston Colleges, Syracuse, your NC States, your Dukes, Wake Forest, that are probably sitting there thinking, well, if this thing goes down, what's going to happen to us? Really? Because really, this is all about Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina. You could probably throw Virginia, probably Alabama, not Alabama, but Miami in there. Probably throw them in there. They're a big household name. But do I think North Carolina is going to try and break it? No. I don't. They have shown me nothing to say, or even whispers to say, like, oh, yeah, here we go. That we need to get out. We need to push ourselves out. We're push. They are very passive aggressive in this. They're sitting back. Now, if Florida State or Clemson was able to find a way, then you would see North Carolina pounce. But North Carolina is going to let them do their dirty work for them. They are. Love the school, but that's what they're going to do. And I get it. They always. It's kind of fitting. We have Mac Brown as a head coach, and he's a lovable old man. We're the lovable old man of the ACC. That's what we are. We're not going to cause too much issue, too much trouble, but If pressed, all right, maybe. But if the ACC was able to be broken and people were to get through the grant of rights, I do believe North Carolina should be out the door with them. But do I think they're going to push it? No.
So it's interesting because UNC's position in all this, as you've mentioned, well, there's various brands. UN or the ACC is somewhat top heavy with brands, and they have a bunch of smaller brands there at the bottom. But there's top heavy brands and schools that everyone anticipates will make or get an invite if the ACC is open to either
Right.
the Big Ten or the SEC. And I do think UNC falls in that. UNC is just too big of a brand. But what's interesting about all this and comparing UNC to some of the other schools, Florida State, for example, and Clemson both overlap, even though they feel like SEC schools and they're strong football brands, both of them overlap with existing SEC footprint. And so does it make sense for the SEC? And then in terms of the Big Ten, it's new footprint for them. Are they big enough brands? Are they AAU or at least, similar in that regard? I know it's not mandatory, but it is a type of thing that they look at and other things that they value. So there's pros and cons either way. UNC, when I look at them, they have the same pros and cons kind of for both the SEC and the Big Ten because they fit both conferences in terms of new geography. North Carolina is a big market, a big state there, and they fit academically with the Big Ten requirements very well. And so UNC has a lot of strengths and a lot of reasons. It's a land grant school. It's contiguous to the SEC schools, which is something they like. They like to be more regional. Still fits with technically it's still actually Southeast, unlike a lot of their other members that they've added. So it just makes a lot of sense for both conferences. But it also has the same downside in both cases, in which is you already mentioned it's a basketball school. Realignment is driven by football, and there is that potential linkage with NC State that is apparently going to be very difficult to get around. Now, I do think that where there's enough money on the line that they'll find a way to get around that, work through that, and separate. I do feel like even though that's there as a roadblock, but it is a roadblock and it is challenging, and there is the chance that you're not able to. And at that point, and you kind of already alluded to this, do either of those conferences with as big and bloated as they already are want to take two schools from the same state, especially when one of those schools, I think NC State is a respected brand, but it's not a national blue blood, as you were saying, in terms of UNC. I think after this Final Four run, I think they're well loved, but yeah, it's certainly not that same staying power. So I guess where I come at this is there's a lot of reasons to like UNC in this, but then there's a couple reasons, and strong arguments as to why UNC might not work out. And so I guess I'm just saying, so what is the case there for both conferences, and how do you see that shaking out? I mean, if they do have that NC State kind of wrapped around their neck, weighing them down, that anchor right there, there are other potential outcomes. I mean, how do you see that playing out?
If I had to pick between one of the two conferences, first off, I would probably go with the SEC. Like you said, it's regional. Everything's right there. They're not the ACC now with schools on the West Coast, the Atlantic Coast Conference, by the way. Just wanted to clarify that. But no, they're the SEC. They're the powerhouse in the football world, and I know that there has been from Bubba Cunningham, our AD. There has been an emphasis over the past couple of years to really even this thing out and really push creating a better football program. I think that's why we saw a lot of the movement in the coaches that we've saw over this past offseason, just right here in the last couple of months here. So if NC State's wrapped around the neck and you can't break it, that's fine. I think to a certain degree you could sell if we're talking it's football driven, right? NC State has been pretty decent in football. As a matter of fact, they got a 3-win streak over North Carolina sitting right now. 3 straight years. And they've consistently been over the last few years in their 8 to 9 win in that 8 to 9 win ratio. So they're pretty respectable, right? And as a matter of fact, I think they go to Tennessee and play Tennessee this year too. So I think you'd be able to sell it enough to make it happen. But I think it's only to a state or to a conference like the SEC. I would be curious to see what a Big 12 thing would be like. I would hate to see North Carolina get drugged down there because as a fan, I want to see them facing the best. If North Carolina's going to get good and they're going to continue to build that brand, they need to continue to beat the best. Like the ACC in basketball is awesome, right? It's been great. And that's what's really helped North Carolina's brand is that the ACC has consistently been good in basketball. It's helped build that brand. But now, if we're talking a football-driven, realignment here, you need to go to the best. I honestly don't know how it would work out with NC State. If you're able to break it, that's best case scenario. But worst case scenario, I still think you'll be able to sell it. It would just be more difficult.
Well, I think if they were, I can't see and I know that's not what you're hoping for. I don't think the Big 12 would ever pass on UNC and NC State. So
Absolutely not.
That's probably the worst case scenario, which you talk about basketball brand, adding that to, Kansas, Arizona, Baylor, Houston, that's, if that's your worst case scenario. But yeah, in terms of financial, it's obviously a distant third. In terms of where these three conferences shake out. So, and I'm wondering for the administration at UNC, how important is it to be aligned with other schools academically? I know that's been something important for the ACC. And if that's the case, do you think the administration would lean more towards the SEC, more regional, versus going with the Big Ten, which maybe is more aligned academically? And do you have any sense for what the administrators there at the university are thinking?
So as a matter of fact, we just got a brand new chancellor. Our old chancellor just went to Michigan State. He just went over there. So it's big for North Carolina to be aligned academically. I mean, North Carolina is a pretty top tier school. I mean, you got North Carolina, Duke, Wake Forest in there, just to name 3 of them. That's right there, just in the state of North Carolina. NC State ain't too shabby either. When it comes to their academics, I think it would be absolutely huge for them to be aligned more academically. But looking at a couple of colleges in the SEC, let's look at Vanderbilt. Ivy League, they're good, man. They're awesome, man. You look at South Carolina. South Carolina's pretty well off academically. And you kind of look at Georgia and Alabama. They're great football programs, but I don't know how academically great they are. I'd have to look at that. But
the rankings of some of those schools, like Florida, Alabama, I think Georgia as well, and I'm not sure exactly where they fall in, but I know when I've looked at lists, they're higher than I expected. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought of these just kind of football, but I also, you can only take those rankings, for what they are so much, and understand that some of those metrics that they use get inflated because they are such big brands and because they're winning. They're admitting some, it becomes more competitive to get into those schools, and so I think some of those things play into it and may inflate that a little bit, but. To your point, they're more football schools, typically thought of as football schools versus academic.
Right.
Not that they don't have academics. I don't want to be taken the wrong way, but as some of the other schools and perhaps the Big Ten.
Yeah, University of Kentucky is another one. I like them a lot, but I honestly don't think too much would change because yes, Carolina is a highly academic school. I mean, we saw that. We see the accolades that they bring in every single year. what it is to even get accepted into there, and how they like to structure their way, even in their football recruiting. By the way, their football
Mhm.
recruiting is a lot of high IQ guys, maybe lower stars. We might not go get the 5-4 stars all the time. We might get a 3 stars, but as a matter of fact, one that just come off the top of my head, we have a linebacker, Cedric Gray, that's going into the NFL draft this year. 3-star guy, high IQ, has been looked at as one of the top linebackers in the ACC. I mean, that's just how we do. We like those high IQ guys. So I don't think too much would change for North Carolina in that. I don't think it would be a too much of a conversation of, okay, Big Ten, what's your academic status versus SEC. As long as they can keep as long as North Carolina can keep what they're doing, I think that'll be perfectly fine. So honestly, that's why I think personally they're a fit for either one, because I don't see too much changing for them outside of financials, a few other small rules, but I mean nothing crazy.
Hmm. And which would you personally prefer to see UNC
SEC,
go to? SEC. Okay.
SEC.
Is that do you get a sense that that's most fans of UNC, or do you think that it's pretty well split? Or
I think the general consensus is for North Carolina, from North Carolina fans, through the Twitter and all the people that I've met. As a matter of fact, I was in Chapel Hill yesterday. Was up there just looking around for some spots for filming, as a matter of fact. But just kind of getting the general consensus from people that you meet on the street and people you meet at the games, and you get on the message boards and everything else. I think the general consensus is everybody would like for North Carolina to go to the SEC, purely for number one, finances, number two, competition. North Carolina is a school, and is, especially in sports competitively, that likes to try and face the best. That's what they want to do. You want to beat the best, got to be, if you're going to be the best, you got to beat the best. That's the way it is. That's the way we like to do our things around here. Um, you know, and I think North Carolina is tired of the disrespect just because they're in the ACC. There was a during basketball season this year, just this. You see Kansas get beat by another Big 12 school. Let's say Baylor, right? Baylor not too great this year. Let's say Kansas gets beat by Baylor. Oh, the Big 12, they're just beating up on each other. They're just so good. Well, let North Carolina lose to Georgia Tech. Oh, that's just a god awful conference, and their number one seeds aren't really number one seeds. And that's the conversation about the ACC. Their football's god awful. They're always disrespectful. I mean, even NFL prospects. Now, how big of a JJ McCarthy fan are you?
I mean, I grew up in Michigan, so but him specifically, I don't have any like strong attachment with him.
Okay. Well, in our recent mock draft, just come out, that
Yeah,
NFL, they have JJ McCarthy going number 3 overall
yeah.
behind Caleb and Jaden. You know where
Mhm.
Drake May fell to?
Where's that?
12th.
Hmm.
Not even top 10. And I'm sitting here watching this quarterback and others around me. I went to some away games this year, and they're like, Jesus
Yeah,
Christ, this dude can just fling it. He's got the innate ability. That's the conversation about the ACC. Even
yeah.
when when the ACC's best is out there, they're nothing.
Yeah, and UNC, that's one thing they've done. They've gotten a couple QBs to the NFL, and not that's something you've done over the recent history. So
Mm.
um, your football program can put NFL talent out there. Um, so with UNC, you're talking you want to go to the SEC. We know that there's that NC State thing, but we're assuming, okay, let's assume there's enough money on the line. There's going to be a solution there to separate them, make sure that NC State has a home. I think Big 12 fans would love to have NC State join them if the SEC does, go the way we think it will. But UNC's been, what's that?
I said, yeah, I agree with you there. I think the Big 12 would probably snag.
So but UNC has been tied with and rumored to be kind of as a partner, travel partner or whatnot in these realignment talks with UVA. And how important do you think that is to UNC, and do you see that being the case, that if wherever UNC goes, they'll bring UVA along with them?
I think it's to number one, both schools are very good academically, like we were just speaking.
Yeah,
Very very good academically. But not only that, it's the oldest rivalry in the South. No, one of the biggest conversations that we're talking about in realignment right now is the Red River Bowl. That's not going to happen. It's
right.
gone, right? And that's a big conversation.
Or
And
Bedlam between
yeah,
Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Yeah,
yeah. So some of these rivalries aren't going to happen anymore. And I think there's a general consensus where North Carolina and Virginia have always been pretty tight friends.
hmm
They're rivals. Don't get me wrong, they're rivals, but they're really tight friends. And I think the two programs mirror each other a lot.
yeah,
They
very
do.
similar.
So I think that's just a consensus of trying to bring those two schools together. Not only is it a rivalry, but they're two very like-minded schools. North Carolina being, I think, a little bit bigger of a brand than Virginia, to say the
Oh yeah,
least.
definitely. Yeah.
But still two schools that mirror each other a lot, and I think two schools that would be great additions to whoever would get them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, very similar. I would say the difference is you hit it on the head, is that UNC is a much bigger brand. And so
Yeah,
UVA, not only are they not necessarily a blue blood, but they're also not a football school. Uh Great at basketball, but not at that traditional blue blood level of UNC. And so to me they seem questionable, especially when they're coming. You could still go into Virginia and get a school that feels, to me, at least culturally, much more like an SEC school in
yeah,
Virginia Tech, who's been not as of late, but traditionally a much better football program. And you
they
just think
got
at
some
the
good young stars this year. I'm not gonna lie, they got some good young stars.
yeah, and I feel like anytime that they might be able to turn it around, but traditionally or culture or not, I guess by reputation, we think of you know UVA, the atmosphere at their games versus Virginia Tech, and it's like, well, which one could you see going to the SEC? And well, Tech
Hmm.
feels much more in line with that. But that's what's curious to me, is I think we'll see a lot of really what these conferences value by who ultimately they elect to bring in, and also how big they're willing to get. I mean, do you think these conferences go beyond 20 teams?
I honestly think if they can get whatever assets they deem out of other colleges that could be true money grabbers, I think they'll go get them. They'll try their hardest to go get them. If they're available and they're on the market, it's going to be a bidding war because they're trying to raise the stock of their brand, their conference, and say, "Hey, only the best are here.
Hmm
Only the best are here." It's a fight. It's business. That's all it is. It really is. It's just business. If North Carolina or sorry, North Carolina, but if the ACC could go and snag up Georgia and Alabama right now, don't you think they'd probably do that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd say, they the best play here, the best play here, the best play here. That's what it is. It's just business. Teams just trying to get the best assets possible that they can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I get it, and I don't think there's a school out there that would pass an opportunity to get into one of those conferences. Nobody wants to be left behind. Everyone wants a chance to make that kind of money, but doesn't mean I like it either. I
Oh
understand
no,
it.
I
I
can't stand
understand
it.
it, but
I'll be honest with you, dude. I love the ACC. I really do, and I would love to see the ACC stick together, personally. But I understand again, it's the evolution of the business. You see the differences in it.
if you could magically say, or whatever reason they're redoing contracts, whatever, and all of a sudden it turns out actually the ACC, you guys are going to be making maybe not even the exact same as the Big Ten or SEC, but we're going to get you 80% there, 90% there, whatever. Would you still rather leave the ACC at this point, like it's a mess, I just want out, or would you rather try to keep the conference together?
I personally would like to keep the conference together.
Yeah,
I personally would.
yeah.
I like the conference. I do like that the ACC is trying to expand it and capitalize on this realignment. I don't agree with who they've brought in.
hmm
Cal, Stanford, SMU. Number one, it's the Atlantic Coast Conference, not the both coast conference. You need to stick within your conference. Honestly, dude, a couple of years ago when West Virginia was up, I thought they should have grabbed West Virginia. Would have been perfect. Perfect time to grab West Virginia. Also UCF before they went to the Big 12. I thought, these are additions. These are good, especially West Virginia. Really good additions there. I think they should have went after those types, but they didn't. And I feel like the ACC has been really good at sitting and being lackadaisical, and now, thinking everything, all right, we're cool, everything's good here. And meanwhile, these other conferences are like, we got to keep getting better. We got to keep going. We got to keep getting better. And now it's catching up with the ACC, and the guys that have supported you, your biggest hitters, are now looking at you and saying, "Hey, we don't want to be here anymore. That's just what it is. We just don't want to be here anymore."
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's been, I think, at least my understanding with the ACC is it's been a status thing, and academics, they're like, West Virginia, you're not aligned with us. You're not, where we're at. And so that's why they got overlooked in those rounds of realignment. And UCF, I imagine the same thing. And those other Florida schools, not wanting to share the limelight with who they see as, little brother on the come up. So, yeah, it's complex. What about, so in this last round, those schools, they're coming from the Big 12. I don't think at this point they would have left the Big 12 for the ACC anymore. But what other schools were out there? I mean, South Florida, maybe, but these would have all been schools you would have been getting from the G5 levels. Like there were no other P5 schools to bring in.
Yeah, and what doesn't help is location. That's how the Big Ten was able to basically swallow up, a good vast majority of the Pac-12, is just because location. They're right next to each other. The ACC is across the country, and what you can say about the SEC is that they have created such a well-built foundation around their schools that nobody wants to get out of the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the step that has been missed with the ACC, is that they built their house on sand. Well, now it's crumbling. And these colleges are looking around like, wait a minute, we generate you the most revenue. We are your biggest brands, and you can't even support us? The heck are we doing here?
Yeah. I think that's one thing that the Big 12 has going for it. Well, one, our biggest brands have already been poached off, and somehow we, managed to stay together and bring in some other brands. And so Big 12 switched the narrative there. And so we're not too worried about other schools being poached off at this point. I mean, there's always a chance that, someone goes and gets Kansas or, something, right? But for the most part, I mean, if the Big Ten keeps going out west, they could go back for the Arizona schools or Colorado or even Utah or something. But for the meantime, we feel pretty steady. But also the conference has been, especially with Brett Yormark, has been very proactive in branding and helping try to drive that narrative. Whereas I've heard on some of my other videos going around the ACC is that's one thing, is that it's felt like the ACC hasn't really done that.
That's
to
exactly right.
To really promote the schools and promote the brand of the conference. And I think they were just kind of happy, sitting up there and being, amongst the top power leagues and not really doing enough to
sitting back, being lazy.
Yeah. Resting on their laurels. So, yeah. Which, is a big difference because financially, right now, the Big 12 and ACC aren't so different. But if the ACC isn't able to stay together and the Big 12 adds additional schools, which I just want to put out there, I'm not really rooting for. I don't want to see another traditional conference, fall apart or, become a shell of itself. I don't want to see that. I know there's some Big 12 fans that are kind of licking their chops, but no matter who the Big 12 gets, even if they get their dream scenario of the whatever, Big 12 still isn't going to close the gap with those other two conferences. And most likely those other two conferences are only going to get even stronger. And so while the Big 12 grows, those other two conferences will grow by more, and the gap will just continue to disappear. So that's frustrating. But I do think that the Big 12 will come out of it being able to make more money, especially getting to the next contract TV contract and being able to say, hey, now we have these additional brands on the East Coast, whatever,
Right.
plus the college football playoff, the way that's distributed, you'd expect to see the Big 12's percentage of that increase and whatnot. So, I mean, those things are good, but yeah, just I'm not sitting here rooting for the demise of another traditional conference. It is too bad. I want to see those rivalries stay together, but it really does
Yeah.
seem like that is the direction things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's at this point, considering the way the ACC is falling, if they're not able to win whenever the next rights and everything go down for either one of the SEC or the Big Ten, more likely, probably the SEC, more than likely. If they're not able to poach somebody from, let's say they stick together, but if they're not able to poach somebody from one of those conferences at some point in time, it's just a ticking time bomb. Just a matter of time until eventually this thing's going to get blown up. Like I think now we're to a point where it's probably gotten just a little bit too far for it just to finish falling that rest of that way. So I honestly feel like eventually it is going to become the power two, and that's just going to be what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel inevitable at this point. All right. So to wrap this up, can you give me like a percentage of the likelihood that you think where you think UNC ends up between Big Ten, SEC, remaining in the ACC, the Big 12, or maybe other? Like how would you break that up?
Ooh, breaking it up out of 100. All right, let's see how we do here. Um, hmm. Well, with the current climate, I honestly feel like there's about a 75% chance of staying in the ACC right now.
Really?
Yeah. Again, because Florida State, at least for the time being, I'm talking until the end of the grants right details, or unless something happens. But right now, it doesn't feel like Florida State has enough power, and they haven't found that little knife in the side in order to win. And Clemson has done their lawsuit, but it doesn't, from what I'm hearing, it doesn't seem like it's got much steam either.
Hmm.
So those two fizzle out. It is what it is. So right
Yeah.
now, I feel like staying in the ACC, like about a 75 to 80% chance. Leaving, going to the SEC would probably be a bigger chance for me. At if I'm trying to make sure I'm doing my math right. I was not a math major. About a 10% chance to go into the SEC, and
Okay.
then I guess you can say the other 10 go into the Big Ten.
All right. Wait, yeah. So wait, you said
Well, we'll
what
do
did you say?
80%. 80% staying in the
80
ACC,
and then
10% to
2020.
SEC, 10% to Big Ten.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Well, this has been enlightening. Thank you so much for joining me, Nathan. It's
Yeah, man.
I think everybody's people are following this constantly, daily. There's
Yeah.
new news about it, and everyone's waiting to see what happens. And everyone has their own theories. And certainly let us know in the comments where you think UNC will end up if and when the ACC implodes, and where you'd like to see UNC end up. And then also, Nathan, let us know where everyone can follow you and all your content.
Oh, so you can go to youtube.com/Heel Brothers. It's just me and my brother on there. We've been lifelong UNC fans ever since we were kids. There's about an 11-year difference between us, but our grandfather, he's from North Carolina up into the Hickory area, as a matter of fact. And he's been a North Carolina fan his whole life, and he instilled it into us. And we have absolutely loved the Tar Heels ever since. And, we do on video what we would be doing if we on the phone or in person anyway. That's what we do. But we have a good time over there. You can also go to X or Twitter, however you want to say that, at Hill Brothers as well. And we are, as of now, on Spotify at Hill Brothers on Spotify as well. And as always, you can always go over to the College Huddle webpage. I think it's thecollegehuddle.com. and you can go on there and you can find us, Hill Brothers North Carolina section. You can see us there, and all our content posted up on the website daily.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure that there are links to all those down in the show notes. So go check it out and check out the Heel Brothers and all their content on all the platforms. And again, thanks so much, and best of luck to you.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.